Just want to talk about some tips for placement of in-ceiling custom installed speakers with regards to boundaries and boundary effects. So what I've done here is I've just put together a very basic room and shown 3 different positions for a typical ceiling speaker here. So the first one, this one here, this is what I would call installed in a sensible part of the ceiling. You've got open area around the speaker. It's not close to any boundaries. A boundary is like a wall like this, or this ledge running along here. And when an in-ceiling speaker just has this sort of free, open, flat area, that is going to sound pretty much as it should do, the way it was tuned at the factory. That's the way they're hoping you're going to fit their speakers. So it'll have a nice balance of bass, mid and treble, and should sound pretty good for most speakers. If we come over here, this position here is up against this one boundary, and in layman's terms what that's going to do is give you an increase in bass. It's a bit like when you put a subwoofer into a corner of a room, it naturally increases the bass output, and that can be a good thing. But here, this speaker is now going to sort of experience an increase in bass output, but it's not necessarily the kind of bass output that you want. It won't sound like you've added a high quality subwoofer. It's just going to give a natural sort of warmth, but it's not ideal. You don't get to hear the speaker as it should be if it was over here in a clear area. So you can compensate for that effect a bit by adjusting EQ and pulling some of the bass off, but also getting into nitty-gritty, it's not just the bass that's affected. It could be frequencies up to and around 500 hertz, so low mids that are being affected by this boundary, but mainly the bass. So in this position, and especially if you move the speaker right down here into this corner where there's 2 extra boundaries, then it's not going to sound as natural as it should. You get an increase in low end in particular. Moving over to this example here where the speaker has been put into a kind of coffer, what's going on here is kind of in a way the opposite. So down the sides here, maybe 10 centimeters away from the speaker on either side, is a drop-off point. Instead of a corner boundary, this is dropping away, and so in effect what that happens there is you get a loss of bass and a steady loss of frequencies up to, again, around 500 hertz. So this speaker could be left sounding extra thin. Another example would be as if you took a ceiling speaker like this and put it into a box, like a speaker box, a cabinet, where this speaker has actually been tuned for a flat surface, what we call, sorry, I should have mentioned earlier, half space use, then these things can end up sounding absolutely horrendous if you build a box for them. So this position here, you get quite a drop off in sound because of these corners, and the speaker doesn't sound the way it should. You may be able to compensate for that partly with bass management. Bass management normally wouldn't go up above, say, 120 hertz, so you're still going to have a gap in the sound. So the point, of course, is coming back to this first speaker here with a nice big flat surface around it, somewhere between 2 to 3 foot minimum perhaps, or a meter, and you're going to get the sound you should be getting.